Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on AI compliance and ethical practices. I am Naomi Grossman, Learning and Content Manager here at VinciWorks, and I've been following the development of AI tools for the workplace. I'm really excited for our program today. We're going to explore how AI regulations, tools, and ethical considerations are really shaping the way businesses and law firms operate, and how you can manage those risks and reap the rewards, because there are a lot of rewards with AI, and we're going to hear about that today. And there's no doubt that AI is transforming industries at an unprecedented pace, offering tremendous opportunities for innovation, increased efficiency, and growth. But of course, with all this rapid advancement comes a very complex and evolving regulatory and ethical landscape. The UK government and international bodies are all scrambling to ensure that AI is developed and deployed responsibly, trying to balance innovation with accountability, with fairness, and with transparency. It's really not an easy or simple balancing act. And I think everyone who's on this webinar today knows that well. Now, for businesses and legal professionals, understanding AI compliance is really no longer an option. It's become a necessity. Whether you're integrating AI into your operations, or you're advising clients on AI governance, or navigating regulatory requirements, the question you are likely always asking yourself is, how do we ensure AI is used responsibly, legally, and ethically? So in today's session, I'm really glad you're all here today. We will look at the current and upcoming AI regulatory landscape in the UK, including the impact of the UK's AI governance framework and international influences. We'll discuss key ethical and compliance challenges organizations face when adopting AI. We'll provide best practices for risk management, transparency, and accountability in AI deployment. And perhaps most significantly, we'll discuss practical steps your business or law firm can take to stay ahead of all these regulatory changes and ensure compliance. So we really want to hear from you today in this webinar. So if you have any questions, any comments, or an experience that on some of these issues, let us know in the chat or the Q&A, and we're going to try to get to all those questions either today, and if we don't get to them today, we will respond to you after the webinar. This session, as I've said, is being recorded. You're going to get a recording right after the webinar. Now, if you would like to see more of VinciWorks training options around AI, you can write AI into the webinar chat now, and someone will be in touch. So we also have a series of upcoming webinars. And if you're looking for more guidance and support on compliance, feel free to join any of our upcoming webinars by clicking on the links coming up in the chat now, or forward these on to colleagues that might be interested. One of the webinars coming up in, I think it's a few weeks, is GDPR 7 years on. We've also got a very big response to that webinar. It's really going to be very interesting and very important. Another webinar on June 4th, preparing for E6. Managing sexual harassment, compliance, and higher and further education. Another important webinar that I think will be really interesting for many of you. Okay, housekeeping out of the way, let's get started. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Henderson-Mayo, VinciWorks regulatory and compliance expert. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Naomi. Great to be here. So much to talk about today.
A lot to talk about. And we're also thrilled today to have our AI guru, Shlomo Agustin, who's with us today. Shlomo is the director of AI for Trillion, an accounting software company. And welcome, Shlomo.
Hi, thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward.
Great to have you here today. It's great to have both of you. So we're going to get started first with a poll question, and we really want to hear from you. And I think this is a great question to start off our discussion today. The question is, do you regularly use AI tools to enhance productivity? Yes, all the time. Yes, on a limited basis. No, we're not sure what tools would help us. Or no, we are just too concerned about the regulations, or you're not sure. So again, the question, do you regularly use AI tools to enhance productivity? Yes, all the time. Yes, on a limited basis. No, we're just not sure what tools would help us. No, we are too concerned about the regulations or not sure. So a couple more seconds for the voting. Do you regularly use AI tools to enhance productivity? And we're going to get to some of the answers and really interesting answers. 25% of you say yes, all the time you use AI tools. 48%, nearly half, yes, on a limited basis. 18% is no, we're not sure what tools would help us. 8% say you don't use AI tools because you're too concerned about the regulations, and 2% are just not sure. So those are interesting results. And if, by the way, if there are any specific tools you use and love, let us know in the chat. We really want to hear about it. And that's really, really interesting. And are those answers you'd expect, Nick or Shlomo?
Yeah, I think it shows that a lot of people are wanting to use more tools, actually. And the fact that nearly half of people are using them on a limited basis, I think suggests that there's definitely appetite for more, but we just want to make sure they're the right ones and they're actually going to help us.
Yeah, that's really true. Thank you for that. Just a note, if you'd like to see our course on understanding AI, a link is coming up in the chat now. Click on that. If the link doesn't work for you, let us know. We can send it directly to you. Okay, now let's really get started. Nick, we have a lot of questions about regulations surrounding AI. This is all still relatively new and evolving. Can you kind of give us an overview of the regulatory landscape?
Absolutely. And it's also a really important place to start because the regulations are really what's ultimately going to drive a lot of how particularly medium to larger companies are going to interact with AI. So and across Europe, really, AI is overseen by the AI Act, which was recently put into force by the EU. And the Act essentially works on a risk-based system for AI tools. So this means there are different regulations or different expectations depending on the risk level that the AI tool can pose to the individual users. So there's 4 different risk classes that exist in the EU AI Act, and it's really important that we understand what those are. And the legislation establishes different obligations for both providers and users depending on the level of risk from AI.
Wow. So it sounds like that's going to have a really big impact. Can you just go through the risk classes?
Yeah, so we'll start with the highest level of risk, which is unacceptable risk. So those are AI systems that are considered a threat to people, and these are banned. And those can involve things like cognitive behavioral manipulation of people, classifying people in socioeconomic status, personality traits, some facial recognition. And you can't use AI tools for subliminal techniques or things like different types of kind of predictive policing. And there's also a ban on untargeted scraping of the internet or CCTV for facial images to build up and expand databases. And it's really important to understand this because there are like some limited exceptions, but also, there might be some things abroad or places outside the EU where that is the case, or they do use that for those sorts of things, but in the EU is banned. So if that's within the realm of things you might be dealing with, it's really important to know that so you can understand the risk. Then the next risk level is a bit more complicated because there are high risk AI systems that are used in products that might fall under the EU's product safety laws, toys, airplanes, cars, medical devices, things like that. Those also have particular regulations around them. And those AI systems are to be registered in EU database if they involve things like critical infrastructure, education, or employment, or law. And then there's also those high-risk systems will need to be assessed before being put into the market and also throughout the lifestyle. So there's a lot to think about if you're dealing with these sorts of higher risk systems.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And so these high-risk AI systems are the ones that receive the most focus under the Act. Is that right?
Yeah, they've got the most regulations around them. And then there's more limited risk AI systems, things like general purpose, generative AI, the chat GPT type things, chatbots, emotional recognition, biometric categorization, that sort of thing. Those do have more minimal transparency obligations, but those are important also. So you have to inform users they're interacting with an AI system and make sure that any kind of synthetic audio or video or text, is done through the copyrighted data that's used for training that has got summaries and is properly published. And then there's the lowest level of AI risk systems, and things like AI-enabled recommendation systems, spam filters, that sort of thing. There's minimal transparency requirements there, but companies do have to allow users to make informed decisions. So it is important for yourself as an organization to have a strong register of what AI systems are being used or likely to be used, and what kind of category they might fall into under the EU's AI Act.
Wow, thank you. That's excellent. And just so everyone knows, you can download our guide to the EU Act now. It's coming up in the chat, or you can just send us a request and it's going to give you all this information and a lot more. And please keep writing in your comments, your suggestions. Again, if we don't get your comments now, we'll get them to you afterwards, send you an email. And all this is really interesting. And I understand the UK is in the midst of coming up with kind of its own approach to AI, and they're calling it pro-innovative. What do you think is it about?
So we're currently dealing with the data use and access bill that's very, very close to being passed by Parliament in the UK. It will make a lot of changes to GDPR, to AI as well, to make it easier to be innovative with data. It's going to potentially loosen restrictions around automated decision making, because right now there are quite strict rules when AI makes decisions about someone getting a loan or jobs, that sort of thing. And under the data use and access bill, companies will be able to automate a lot more of that unless they're dealing with more sensitive information like health data. So it could make AI more able to be integrated into existing tools. On the other hand, there'll be less human oversight, and that might lead to kind of biased decision makings. So that's kind of what people are thinking about at the moment.
So it sounds like it's almost like a double-edged sword here.
It could be, and that's also the government will be able to order companies to share information, to share data, including for AI training. So, I mean, it could be very good for speeding up AI development, but also big businesses might be worried about sharing too much information or losing an advantage. So, I mean, there's a lot of noise around how it's going to work in practice, but we'll need to kind of wait and see how that happens once it does get passed.
So it sounds a little bit messy, but I guess that's data policy in 2025. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, essentially, I think it's going to make it easier and faster to build and deploy AI systems in the UK, but it does also raise questions around things like privacy, fairness, and how individuals can challenge AI decisions about them. And we're very close to it being passed. So, I think we're going to probably see it become law before the summer recess, and then we'll get a timeline and a bit more soon, and we'll know when these things start to come into force.
Okay, so we'll need to keep everyone posted on that because sounds like it's coming soon.
Yeah.
And now let's move to the United States, which is always interesting. And there's not really a comprehensive AI Act. It's more like a set of guidelines now, and different states have released bills concerning different aspects of AI.
Yeah, and that also does make it more complicated for companies to keep up with those regulations they need to follow. Because you might be following guidelines that requires in one state, but actually, it's not relevant for another state. So there is a lot to keep up with.
Is that going to change soon? Like, can you anticipate anything coming down the pike?
I mean, it's hard to say at the moment, considering how much AI itself has changed over the last few years. We've had some policy change. So the Biden administration put out an executive order in 2023 around the use of AI in federal agencies. There was some discussion around regulation of the industry, some engagement with other, with kind of the big stakeholders. There was, thought about establishing government-wide parameters for responsible AI. The Trump administration now has released a new executive order which focuses more on the removal of policies that might block AI innovation. So there is a kind of bit of a change happening there in terms of AI policy in the US, and probably we'll see a bit more change as well.
Likely, and we'll keep everyone updated on that also. But so what do all these evolving regulations mean for a law firm or for a company?
So for me, anyone really that's looking to benefit from AI, it's very important to remain diligent about how those evolving regulations are going to impact on your own organization and what the consequences of either using AI or not using AI will be. So for instance, AI use in law firms has transformed a lot of productivity for lawyers. Tools such as document review, some research, contract analysis. It can save a lot of time, with these sorts of tasks that can be done by AI. But if the law firm or even the company themselves doesn't make sure that people are using AI within the correct parameters, there can be penalties, and there can be things that go wrong.
So it's a real value. It's a real balance between the value to the organization versus the risks that they could face.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that a lot of organizations are really kind of struggling with at the moment. I mean, we can see how much time AI is supposed to save. We know it's supposed to make things more efficient, but at the same time, there are some, risks, and sometimes things go wrong. So there was a case that we saw in 2023 with a law firm called Levidown Oberman, where one of the lawyers submitted a brief containing 6 made-up cases, because they put information into chat GPT and they came up with false information. And it just happened also either today or yesterday in the UK as well. A lawyer was kind of told off by a judge in the UK for doing exactly the same thing. And that can happen obviously in any industry. It can happen in any place where you assume the information coming out is correct, but actually it's not. And companies and firms do have to ask themselves, are they willing to spend the time and energy to properly educate employees on the do's and don'ts of AI usage? So if you do want to kind of set up internal guidelines about how to use AI responsibly, then yes, definitely it can be worth the potential risk of it. But it is very important to kind of understand how it actually works and what the pitfalls are.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That case sounds crazy. Both these cases sound crazy. Could you tell us a little more about the case that was already done? The widow over.
So I was a New York-based lawyer. I'm Stephen Schwartz from this Levidown Oberman firm. And the lawyer had a lot of experience, over 30 years they've been practicing for, and used the chat GPT tool to research previous cases for a current case that he was working on. But when the brief got to the judge, it came out that this chat GPT had given the lawyer completely made up cases. So I think we would call that a hallucination. Those cases just didn't exist. And the lawyer had apparently no idea that the tool was able to do that, to come out with inaccurate or made up information, and didn't bother to cross-reference the information, and he was fined $5,000. Terrible PR for the firm in general.
Yeah, I can't imagine how badly that must have reflected their credibility. I mean, $5,000 sounds like nothing compared to the other impact. So it's a kind of a frightening story. But it's perfect time for our second poll question, and very relevant to what we're discussing. The question is, do you have an AI training program in your company? Yes, we have one that we're happy with. Yes, but we really need to update it. No, but we want to implement one. No, we don't think we need it, and not sure. So we really want to hear from everyone here. Do you have an AI training program in your company? Yes, we have one we're happy with. Yes, but we need to update it. No, but we want to implement one. No, we don't think we need it, and not sure. So really curious to hear the answers to this one, for obvious reasons. Do you have an AI training program in your company? So, wow, this is interesting. Only 10% of you said, yes, we have one that we're happy with. 6% said, yes, we need to update it. Yes, but we need to update it. 57% of you said, no, but we want to implement one. 9% say, no, we don't think we need it. 18% are not sure. So pretty interesting results, I would say. But what do you think? Nick, what do you think of those results? Or Shlomo?
No, I think that the 57%, I think, make up a very strong kind of they're representing a very, very serious problem within many industries, is that people know about the value of AI, or they're aware of it, but there's also organizational freezing around how to go about it because of the risks that we talked about, and the things and the further stuff that we're going to talk about. And I think that this is a good opportunity within this webinar to talk about maybe some ideas about how to begin thinking about AI adoption frameworks and things like that. As far as the 9% who said that we don't need it, I hope we will convince you otherwise. I think,
Great,
and,
great segue.
and the one who say it's not sure, like I think that they need to make their superiors aware of that. You know, employees should know that their companies are thinking about this.
Yeah, that's great. Great point. And so here's a question, Shlomo, and this is perfect, perfect segue. So what can you tell us? What do you think the value of AI tools are for a company and firm? Like, is it worth the risks that these companies are going to face?
So I think, like, I mean, you know, for all sorts of bias reasons, right? Because I work for an AI tool company, but I think the answer is obviously yes. And I think that the potential of AI, we're just scraping it in the beginning of it. And been this pat comment that's been going around for a long time. Everyone claims credit for saying it, where you will not be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by a person using AI. I dislike that comment. I think it's a little bit snarky, but I think that the sentiment behind the comment is very true, that AI is really effective in scaling up people's efficiency and people's abilities to do work the way they want to do work. And, you know, we'll go through this later where, you know, AI, like we see within our work at Trillion, with accountants and auditors, that people are saving weeks of work. Like literally, they're starting to, you know, consider their time savings and efficiency savings in terms of weeks. Mistakes are being caught. Audit scales are increasing. Like AI is doing tremendous things. Now there are lots of risks, and the risks are real, and the risks are scary. And I think, you know, this is where we really get into the conversation about general AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, even, you know, Microsoft Copilot and others versus vertical AI tools. And vertical AI tools, let's say in the legal field, you may have heard of Harvey or Legal Tax or others. Within accounting, there's trillion digits, a decimal. There are many vertical AI tools. And these are companies that are going within industries and understanding the vertical, understanding the needs, and really trying to help mold AI for the use cases that are being asked for. Within mental health, there's a great company called Neuroscribe that's just been developed to help with mental health issues. But again, like understanding that the risks even with these vertical AI companies still exist is important, but the value is just can't be ignored.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And coming up in the chat now is going to be a link to our guide, AI and Compliance, Risks and Opportunities for Compliance Professionals in the Artificial Intelligence Age. It's a really comprehensive guide. I think it's really going to be of value to everyone on this webinar. So, Shlomo, I feel like we should kind of take a step back. And can you explain to us about kind of the journey of information? Like, we put data into ChatGPT. What happens? What happens then? Why is this so risky? And what's the whole process?
So how does a prompt become an answer for ChatGPT? I think it's really important to understand the architecture of these AI models, even without going deep into the math or the AI, because that story of Stephen Schwartz would have never happened if Stephen even had a basic familiarity with how ChatGPT worked. Because he would understand that the way ChatGPT works, at least at the time when Stephen was using it, at that point, it was the entire ChatGPT interface, meaning what you use, that chat bar which you type into, was simply sending text to a model, and the model was returning a response. And on a basic level, the way these AI models work is that they take your text, right? Imagine your sentence, they convert it to a sequence of numbers, which are called tokens. And it's a very interesting topic how they get developed, but it has these tokens, and what it does is does something called auto-regressive generation. So it's a very fancy way for saying you take a prompt or a sentence. We can take, I went to the library and took out A, and then it chooses, you know, on a token level, but for us, we can think of it as words. It's the same thing. What is the most likely next word? And we have some kind of probability distribution. It could be book, it could be movie if you're still living in 1990, right? It could be right, newspaper with some small probability, right? So then it chooses the most likely next word. So let's say book.
it attaches it to the sentence, and it sends the sentence back inside the model. And now it says, I went to the library, I took out a book. What should be the most likely next word? Let's say it's for. So I took out a book for, and so on and so forth. It builds sentences. So what that means is that on the basic, very primal level, the model has no concept of searching or knowledge or anything. It's simply a next word generator. Now, because it is such a large and powerful model and it's been trained on petabytes of text, it has a really great understanding of really, really complicated dependency relationships within text that make it sound like it almost knows things. But that is because we as a species have developed this concept called language that's really great at embedding knowledge within syntax. Right, within our language, we're really good at being able to transmit knowledge from one person to another. And if a being or a model is able to understand the structural elements of knowledge, really based on just reading a lot of it, it's able to recreate really, really cogent sentences. But it doesn't actually know anything. That was the ChatGPT of the days of Stephen Schwartz. Fast forward a year or two, now ChatGPT that you use, or Gemini or others, are composed of three components. So they tend to be composed of a model, then they have what are called tools, and then they have what's called memory. There's a fourth component called agents, but we're not going to go down that black hole. But any AI tool you try to get now, we'll be talking a lot about agentic AI, and maybe we can talk about it at some point. But for now, just the basics. So ChatGPT gets a question from you, and before it does anything, it uses a model to say, what type of information do I need to answer the question? And it has Google search as one of its tools. It has a kind of programming interface if you're asking it to run code. And it has all these different tools that it's able to use to get information. It takes that information, it does a Google search, and it takes that information and puts it inside your prompt or your question. So your question, when it goes to this model, now looks like, Naomi asked this, and these are the Google search results that are relevant. And this happens really quickly, because they use various techniques called distributed programming. And this is why, as we're going to talk later, Microsoft and OpenAI are investing in building nuclear power plants in the US, because these types, to be able to run these models at this scale, at this speed, requires immense amounts of electricity and immense amounts of data centers and immense amounts of computing power just to make it just say, here is a poem in the style of, Mary Had a Little Lamb, right? And there was a quote where Sam Altman from OpenAI said, please stop saying please and thank you to the models. You are causing tremendous waste of electricity by just adding, pleases and thank yous, because it forces it to kind of generate more text. So but this is how it works. It uses these tools, it collects its information, puts it into the model, and the model generates. And you'll see in modern, these modern chatbots, they give you these sources. Well, what these sources are the search results that were found by these various tools, which using the information to be able to generate. However, hallucination risk, meaning it's still just generating what is most probable. What is most probable is not always what's true, right? So the risk of hallucination is brought down because they are getting more valuable and genuine information, but hallucination risk still exists.
Wow, that's excellent. Thank you. Almost a little frightening, like someone just commented how scary fast it all goes, but really, really interesting. So in light of all that, what do you think are the implications for businesses that are using these open AI tools, which is mainly generative content like ChatGPT?
So I do think that businesses that are using them need to be able to understand that probable is not true, and the types of mistakes that AI tools make are not the types of mistakes that humans make, right? We can't distill accuracy to a number, right? When you have a person who is 85% accurate in their responses and you have a model that's 85%, it's not the same thing. It's not apples to apples. And what that means is that if you are using AI within your business, you need to be able to have really great verification and review processes in place to be able to rely on the content that you're giving out, because human mistakes are even able to, like, you could predict human mistakes. Like, people are tired, but their mistakes kind of are reasonable. AI mistakes are not. They could be random, right? So there is I think that there's a real importance in making sure that AI is available and it's great to use, but you really need to be aware of what the shortcomings are, and you need to communicate them to your users, and you need to make sure that you are dealing with kind of external in some kind of external way with the possibilities of these hallucinations.
Well, thank you. That's really so important to know. So, Nick, with all that as background, tell us about their implications of cases like the one with OpenAI being sued for scraping copyrighted books to train the ChatGPT. Can you tell us about the case and kind of like what are the implications of cases like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing one. It's very, very important to kind of be following along because, as I was saying, this is a relatively new tool and new ways of doing things. So it's not necessarily bound to current, copyright rules. And in this case, OpenAI has been sued for scraping what's essentially a pirate library online. And some big authors like George R. R. Martin and John Grisham have been joined this class action suit, claiming that OpenAI has used their books without permission. And they said that the model can summarize their books and generate content very clearly in that particular style, whereas OpenAI is defending that based on fair use. So we're getting into this kind of like, I think ongoing debate where is it training that will be transformative and helpful and do good things versus things that are copying or redistributing information that has been created by someone else. Also, the New York Times has sued OpenAI for using the newspaper's content and without permission in order to build ChatGPT. It was one of the first major news organizations to sue an AI platform over copyright, with the Times claiming that these AI chatbots were trained on consuming articles published by the Times, and they didn't have a right to access that. And there's also other cases going on where different AI tools are being sued. There was one AI tool that was looking at legal summaries and wasn't allowed to use that. So there's an absolute ongoing kind of battle between some of these AI firms, and depending on how much they're being trained on. And the New York Times, has not demanded a specific amount of compensation for in their current lawsuit, but they said that the defendants should be held responsible for something like billions of dollars based on how much OpenAI is making.
Wow. So that's a big case. And I guess it sounds like it has a lot of implications, like all these cases do, because it's also new. But like, where's that case now? The New York Times case. What's happening with that?
I mean, it's ongoing, and I think the wider implication is what happens when these things eventually reach some kind of settlement. So, if the New York Times is successful in suing OpenAI for using the material, what does that say for anyone that maybe has used some kind of tool and benefited from that copyrighted material? So, we could end up in this very big mess, really, that if we're potentially using AI tools that are potentially trained on possibly copyrighted information, then what is that going to say about the output? We also know that the output can't be copyrighted. So what does that say also about if your organization is relying on some of those outputs? So I know some companies have even put in indemnity clauses in contracts with AI vendors. So whenever you see kind of AI on a label of anything you might be using or thinking about buying, it's very important to ask some very detailed questions about it.
Right. I'm sure most of our listeners today use ChatGPT. I mean, that it's so widespread at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure, absolutely, and it's also the case with the lawyers we talked about. You cannot blindly trust AI generated content or publish, AI written as text without review. And these lawsuits are moving fast, and the rules can change very, very quickly. So it's very, very important to understand that, particularly if you're buying things, if you are, potentially using, vendors. It's just very, very important to be aware of that. And what does that mean?
Yeah. It's so true. And thank you for that. Shlomo, what do you think? Should a company think about an ethical perspective when implementing AI tools?
So I think that, first of all, companies should think about an ethical perspective with everything they do, uh, including using AI tools. But I do think that companies, I think, need to understand, and businesses need to understand that even with the rise of AI vertical tools, like the ones that are built specifically for industries and for businesses, there is still a caveat emptor, like a buyer beware dynamic that like businesses that are adopting need to be aware of. And I think we'll talk later about maybe some ideas about AI adoption protocols. But what's happening right now is that there is this incredible explosion within the AI tool space where every single industry is starting to become flooded with various AI tools that solve this pain, that pain. We solve lease accounting and audit, and other people are solving bookkeeping. And there's massive competition. And Y Combinator, one of the large venture capital incubators in the Valley, like in their last class, they had like dozens, like the vast majority were AI tools for various legal, accounting, financial services industry. And every one of these companies have to differentiate themselves in some way. So they're making a lot of very, very big promises about what they're able to do. As Nick mentioned earlier, like a lot of the AI data laws are still, being developed and are murky. So, and at the end of the day, your users know you, your customers know you. They don't know what tools you use. If there's reputation damage, often it ends up falling on the end user who's holding the bag. So I think that one thing to think about when you're shopping for tools is don't shop for tools, shop for partners, shop for companies. Find AI providers, AI tool providers that you're able to develop relationships with, where you can have honest conversations, and that the people who are selling the tools understand your industry and understand the tool. And it may even be helpful at some point to have a conversation with a technical person who could, they should be able to explain their AI to you in a way that you can understand. If they can't, it probably doesn't exist. The other thing I would say is that it's really I think helpful when you're developing these questionnaires. A lot of the questionnaires that we get as a company are I find them to be shocking. And somebody probably went into ChatGPT and said, "Develop for me an AI questionnaire," and then they send it to us. Like the questions don't reflect the risks or what's really going on. So when you're developing kind of pre-purchase questionnaires, I think it's really important to sit down with somebody who understands the AI, understands your business very well, and come up with really and try to make sure that the questionnaire contains the questions that should be asked and that you really want to know the answers to, as opposed to just adopting some AI framework that you found online. Because every business is unique, every organization is unique. You know your business, you know your risks, you know your exposures, and at the end of the day, it's going to be on you to protect them.
So really excellent points. Thank you. And just a quick poll question that's really relevant because before we continue. And the question is, what concerns you most about AI tools? And there might be more that concerns you now after this conversation, but we want to hear what you think. Is it accuracy, plagiarism, cybersecurity, discrimination potential, privacy, regulatory compliance, or something else? And please write in the chat what that something else is. So what concerns you most about AI tools? Accuracy, plagiarism, cybersecurity, discrimination potential, data privacy, regulatory compliance, or something else? And someone just wrote in the chat all of them, and that's a legitimate answer. But if you can say what's your biggest concern for the poll, what's your biggest concern about AI tools? Accuracy, plagiarism, cybersecurity, discrimination potential, data privacy, regulatory compliance, something else. Many of you are writing all of these, and that is fair. What's your biggest concern here? Which one? So interesting. 31% of you say your biggest concern is accuracy. 4% say plagiarism. Only 9% say cybersecurity. 3% discrimination potential. 38%, and that's the biggest chunk of voters, say data privacy. 14% say regulatory compliance, and 3% said something else. And we'd love to hear what that is if you could write in the chat. So these are interesting results. Now, let's go to one of the concerns that everyone mentioned here is data privacy, and that these companies can use our data in ways that we wouldn't want. And I'm thinking now about the recent launch of DeepSeek. So, yeah. Nick, can you discuss that a little bit? It caused a stir even in our office.
It did.
About it.
It did. So it really kind of sums up a lot of the concerns that people are sharing there in the chat about data privacy and so many other aspects of it. So DeepSeek obviously was this Chinese AI startup that launched recently, and it caused a massive stir in January as this ChatGPT competitor. Within 2 weeks, it was most downloaded free app on the iOS store. And Shlomo will tell us a little bit more about this, but the company embraced these kind of open source principles. Supposedly their models allowed developers to access and build on the network, but then very quickly things started to unravel slightly. Cybersecurity researchers discovered that the database was misconfigured, exposed millions of sensitive records, including chat messages, API keys. Probably more concerning though was compliance with Chinese government censorship policies. The AI model avoided or redirected discussions on sensitive topics that the Chinese government didn't want to be talking about, such as Taiwan. So it aligned, with communist government narratives. South Korea suspended DeepSeek downloads because of data protection concerns. I know there's a number of GDPR investigations happening with DeepSeek. Agencies like the Pentagon and NASA have banned it and because of these security and ethical issues. So it just shows how something can begin and then kind of just blow up and become not the right one to use.
Seriously, Shlomo, does DeepSeek concern you? And is it scary? How does it compare to let's say Western AI models?
So I think that the DeepSeek from the technical perspective, like how it hit us and why it caused the stock market to crash right after it came out, including shares in NVIDIA dropping 20% and others, was because what they had shown or they had claimed to show was that right now, the justification for all these massive AI expenditures is because these models to train require $10 million of electricity, crazy amounts of compute, crazy amounts of data. And what they were able to do is they were able to mimic the most advanced, what's called thinking OpenAI model. At that point it was called 01. They were able to replicate it with a model that cost them like 1/100th of the amount of money to train. It was much smaller, and they were able to release this model on the open market to go allow everyone to donate it. And it really kind of sent this, shot across the bow that, hey, AI could be done cheaply. It could be done, efficiently. It doesn't require all this massive investment in people like OpenAI and Gemini to be able to do. And we don't need this crazy amount of chips, which hurt NVIDIA. But for some reason, very soon afterwards, it faded. The stock market recovered, or at least until now, and for some reason, the buzz died very quickly. So there were some concerns that Nick mentioned about the DeepSeek app itself with all the violations and privacy. But even on the technical level, they did come up with some very interesting innovations that were then immediately integrated into OpenAI and to everyone else. But when people dug into the paper of how they trained the model, including there were some comical points when they asked the model, "Who are you?" and it said, "I am the GPT trained by OpenAI," that a lot of questions became where they get the data to train the model. And there were a lot of concerns that what they did was they used a process that's called distillation, where they basically used OpenAI's model to generate all the data and everything that they need to be able to take their model and learn from the OpenAI model, meaning they would have never have been able to build their thing had the OpenAI o1 not existed. And this is something which I think brought a big reality check where, yes, we know that there exists this concept of distillation where smaller models could be used to learn specific tasks from larger models, but we still need these really large models. And therefore, DeepSeek, it was great. It gave us a lot of new ideas. The DeepSeek open source models themselves are being incorporated by companies like Perplexity and others in their workflows because the models themselves have no connection to databases or to anything. It's just a model. But I think over time, the earth-shaking revelation that AI could be done in this, magic way.
Thank you for that. And that's really interesting and just interesting to think about. I was going to say concerning, but probably more interesting. And let's go to another poll before we move on. Does your organization currently have an AI usage policy in place? I think a really, really important poll here, considering what we've been talking about. And the answers are yes, it is enforced. Yes, but it's not very strictly enforced. Important distinctions. It is in development. No, but we know we need one. And no, and it's not even being considered yet. So does your organization currently have an AI usage policy in place? Yes, and it is enforced. Yes, but it's not very strictly enforced. It is in development. No, but we know we need one. No, it's not being considered yet. A couple more seconds for everyone to answer. Does your organization currently have an AI usage policy in place? Okay, really interesting. 16% of you say yes, and it is enforced. 14% say yes, but it is not very strictly enforced. 34% say your AI usage policy is in development. 24% of you say no, but we know we need one. And 12% of you, surprising, say it's not even being considered yet. So really, really interesting responses. Okay, Shlomo, tell us about some of the AI tools that you would recommend to my business or my law firm.
So, obviously Trillion, no, I'm saying, but there's I can't recommend any tool because I think that every single business and every single industry is very unique and you know your needs. And I think that there are a lot of great tools out there. What I do recommend, and I'll keep this quick because we are short on time, is just thinking about an AI adoption framework. And I think the most important thing is instead of thinking about what tools, think about needs. What are your needs? What are your pains? What are your processes? Sitting down and making a real workflow map to be able to identify where you would want to implement AI first, where it's most profitable for you, where it's the most easily tested, where you can identify if it works. The second thing is making sure that you have AI champions within the company. You have a dedicated people who are going to be responsible for researching, implementing, and guiding the rollout of these tools because you only get to make the right choice once. And then the third thing is play around, but there are lots of new tools. Everything changes, so choose one that works and stick with it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Really, really important information. Coming up in the chat now is a link to our incredibly comprehensive Compliance Tech Buyer's Guide. It has all the latest, most up-to-date info. So I would really recommend it. A link to it is coming up in the chat right now. So one of the ways that companies will find that AI can be implemented effectively is in e-learning. At VinciWorks, we're moving into enhancing our courses by combining conversational AI with our subjects to create a much, much richer experience. Nick, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually going to show a brief demonstration of that. So I'm just going to get that up on the screen and show you what it's like. So hopefully we can all see that. So this is our conversational learning set of courses that we've developed at VinciWorks, where we're trying to kind of flip the script on AI. So instead of having AI tools that we're kind of struggling to work with, this is something that's going to work for us, where we've actually trained our own AI on a number of different compliance topics. One of these is cybersecurity and phishing, obviously very relevant and in the news today day with the hacks on Marks and Spencer's and Harrods and those sorts of places. So this is a phishing simulator that we've developed, and we've trained it ourselves with our own compliance experts at VinciWorks. So just to show you how it works, I'm going to put in a name here. My name is Nick, and it's going to start speaking to me. So I'm going to say, hi, let's begin. And then instead of kind of a boring approach to training where, things are kind of given to you, this is supposed to be dynamic. We're incorporating different kinds of videos, and then, we're going to watch this video, and then it's asking me here, what red flags did I notice that, might be a malicious phishing attempt? And, if I don't want to play along, and if I say, I don't care, let's say, for instance, then it's actually going to get me back on track. It's going to, I can't really break this. This is about taking users through the course in a way that's going to keep them active, keep them engaged. And I can say things like, I'm not sure. Can you give me a hint? And even, there isn't really ways to click through this. It's going to take me back through these different scenarios, or even I might say something like actually I didn't understand this, explain again. And it uses the power of things like conversational learning, which is what we're calling it, to be able to have this ongoing conversation where the training and the learning becomes not just a one-way, I'm consuming this, but I'm actually able to converse with the with the system. So we've been developing this for a number of different courses: money laundering, phishing, equality and diversity, and we're actually launching this very, very soon. The first week of June is going to be available for people to use. And actually, if you want to try it out yourself now and think of it for your own organization, you can write CL demo, so conversational learning demo, into the chat, and we're going to be able to give you a much more in-depth demo than I've given just now. So that was just a very brief preview. I'm going to stop sharing, but if you are interested in seeing more of that, whether it's phishing, D&I, AML, on all of the compliance courses that we do at VinciWorks, you can write a CL conversational learning demo, and we'll be in touch with you specifically to set up that. But that was just a brief preview of what's coming in June.
Wow. Thanks, Nick. That was great. Really, really interesting. And I see there's a lot of interest in this, understandably so. And just want to let everyone know we've had amazing questions coming in. We're going to keep going for an extra couple of minutes. If you have to go, thank you so much for being in this webinar. And like I said, it'll get recording. You'll get your questions answered if they're not answered in the webinar. We're just going to go for a couple more minutes to get to some of these great questions. Okay, so before we get to these questions, Shlomo, I'm just going to ask you final question that I think everyone's going to want to know. Where do you see all this going? What's your vision for kind of the AI future here?
So I don't know where it's going. If I knew, I would have invested in NVIDIA a long time ago. But I think that where it's going in the short term is there's full penetration. Like AI is going to be in every tool you use, whether it's in your professional life or your personal life. And it's really, really important to educate yourself now because, we didn't have a chance to mention the horrible stuff from Meta about sexually explicit conversations with minors in Meta chat. And it's going to be everywhere, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to be ready for it, whether as an employee or employer, a business owner, a parent, a colleague. And I think the time of thinking that AI is a fad that's going to pass is gone. And it's just going to get more and more and more involved. But what it also means is that the potential for innovation, your potential for innovation has been unlocked. And what's going to decide, I think, the future for people of how they are able to coexist with AI in their industry is going to be if they're able to learn how to harness it to innovate within their industry. Accountants are the ones who are going to be able to innovate in accounting much better than anybody else. Lawyers will innovate in law. They will use AI as a tool to unlock innovation. It's really important that people start thinking about if I had all the time in the world and I had all the tools in the world, how would I change my field? How would I change my industry? Because very soon you're going to be able to do that.
Wow, thank you. That's a great vision for the future. Great insight. We have one more poll question, and then we're going to get to your questions. And this is a really relevant poll question now. What's the most interesting opportunity you see with AI in your industry? Automating routine tasks, personalizing customer experience, enhancing data analysis and insights, supporting training and onboarding, improving compliance and risk management, something else, and let us know in the chat what that something else is. So what is the most interesting opportunity you see with AI in your industry? Automate the most interesting, because I know a lot of you will say a few of these are relevant, but tell us the most interesting opportunity. Automating routine tasks, personalizing customer experience, enhancing data analysis and insights, supporting training and onboarding, improving compliance and risk management, or something else. And please, please let us know what that something else is. And again, it's 3 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock. If you have to go, we understand. And you'll get a recording of the webinar. So answers, 41% of you say automating routine tasks. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Personalizing customer experience got 4% of you. 30% say enhancing data analysis and insights. 11% of you say supporting training and onboarding. 13% say improving compliance and risk management. So really, really interesting comments. Okay, we're going to get to some of your excellent questions now. Shlomo, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and if you can answer, we're going to ask on the spot. And these are questions that came from you guys. First question, Shlomo, how is the industry looking to protect its data using open source AI? And it's a really excellent question.
So that's a great question, actually. And so I think there is a misnomer. I think open source AI is a little bit of a confusing concept. I think people feel open source AI means that the AI is accessible by everybody, but that's not what it means. Open source AI means that the models are available for companies to be able to download and keep within their own compliance boundaries. So if you're SOC 2 compliant, you can have all of your models within all the proper cloud. You're able to have full control over access to the model. One of the big concerns, and I saw it mentioned in the chat as well, is that these larger companies like OpenAI or Gemini, like, what are they going to do with your data? Like, it's great that they say that they don't save any data, they don't touch any data, but like, what do we really know? So there is an approach that we're in process of developing at Trillion. I know even in the US, companies like Goldman Sachs and others are talking about it, is this idea of the orchestration layer versus the data layer. And the orchestration layer is that there are these, like, really, you use the most advanced AI models from OpenAI to be able to come up with a plan and to use as a user these smaller open source models, that those are sitting completely within the company's framework, and only those models have access to your data. And all that they feed back to this large open source model is some heavily digested output, but they have no access to your actual core data. So that's one of the ways how open source models are being used as to kind of create this layer of separation between the proprietary data and what's actually being sent to companies like OpenAI and Gemini.
That's great. Thank you. And we're going to take one more question, and then we have a bunch of other questions, and we're going to get to all of them. We're going to send them out after the webinar. But Shlomo, can an employee become too AI dependent?
So there's actually been this very interesting research that was released by Microsoft Research recently, which showed the impact on critical thinking by overuse of generative AI. And it showed how users over time would outsource more and more of their critical thinking and their thought process to these models, which is really dangerous because you tend to over rely on them. And this can lead to a real drop in performance. In fact, they found that when they had AI predicting X-ray results, the AI did pretty well. Doctors predicting X-ray results did pretty well. When doctors used an AI system, the results plummeted because the doctors over-relied on the AI and the AI developers relied on the doctors. So I think that the key is, if you're going to be using AI, you need to understand that there's a massive shift happening, that you're going from someone who does the task to a reviewer. And that's a different skill set. And therefore, I know for us that we're putting a lot of work into our user experience to make review engaging and interesting, but it's hard. It's hard when you used to be the one writing to now having to check someone else's work. And I think that's one of the largest risks and one of the most, I think, one of the largest difficulties in really adopting AI that we're seeing.
That's a great point and a great note to end on. So I want to thank everyone who came along today and asked your questions.